Hi everyone, welcome to FilmDirt. I've recently revisited The Exorcist. I've seen the original cut of the movie many years ago, and since I have the extended director's cut, now is as good a time as any. So I settled down to watch this one evening with my wife. You've got to see horror films in the evening, haven't you? You can't see them during the day. There's no point, is there? And my wife doesn't like horror films, so it took a while to get her to watch this great film. So she's finally agreed to watch it with me. And halfway through the film, my projector fails. The bulb popped and it threw the whole room into darkness suddenly, and my wife screamed and then I laughed, which she didn't like. So I have to admit it was kind of spooky. So we eventually watched the rest of the film on the TV, and really, what a joy. It's been a while, like I said, and I've come to appreciate it more. With the director's cut, I don't think there's too much more to gain from it. I deliberately didn't read up on what the changes were because I don't really want to see differences. I don't want to see mistakes. Otherwise, I'm looking for them and it kind of ruins the film for me. So I know that a couple of the additions are at the end, and one major effect which I'm glad is actually in the film, it's the spider walk. I think they waited till now to actually do it justice and remove the apparatus that was holding up the performer during the walk down the stairs. So that's a nice addition to the film, and it just makes things, more spooky if they weren't already. It's a bit like Superman, isn't it? You've got to try and hide the wire somehow, or the illusion and the storytelling behind that moment is ruined, isn't it? So I think it's a benefit to the movie that the shot is in there. Now, there's a whole intro to the film which takes quite a long time, and we've got Max von Sydow's character, Merrin, in Iraq, exploring ancient evil and trying to learn more about it. And it does take a long time, but I was invested throughout, and it's quite interesting to, explore evil and all that mythology. And I do understand that the writer of this film, William Peter Blatty, he did base this story on a real event, where apparently a lot of the set pieces in this film are direct reproductions of the original story. And that's quite scary in itself, to imagine this or anything similar to this actually happening. And in comparison to other similar demonic horror films, such as The Omen, this one is very simple. The Omen I found to be a little bit more story driven, and you've got, some Bible scriptures, and he's got to go to a certain person to discover what to do and how this happened. Whereas this film, it's perfectly simple. Linda Blair's character Regan is possessed by a demon or Satan himself, and they have to call in an exorcist. Such a great film is very simply based on that premise. And then we're kind of exploring the background of Karras's character, played by Jason Miller, brilliantly. I loved his performance, where he's kind of losing his faith somewhat, not completely, but he has a lot of unhappiness in his life and a lot of bad things happen to him, it seems. And I guess you are kind of losing faith, especially when you're wronged by people. I can understand that you feel, like you have to let go. So that's a nice little side angle. And of course, it's his character which actually saves the day in the end, because he does regain what he lost for himself, in that the love he showed ends up extracting the demon from the child, and by throwing himself out the window, presumably ends up killing the demon. That's how I read it. Anyway, I know there's sequels. I'm going to probably explore those at a later time. But all in all, I think this film is quite wound up, really, quite neatly, and in a quite satisfying way to me. So here they go through two priests. One fails, and Karras is the victor. And let me just add that the whole cast are great here. I don't think there's a bad performance at all, and the film is presented brilliantly. And there's none of that feeling where they say, oh, certain films were ahead of their time and they would work if they were released today. No, this film, I think you can tell it was made at the time it was made. And that's why it's so great. It definitely does look like a product of its time. And it does remind me of the old Hammer House of horror films. You know, if you're in the UK, you'll have seen one or two of those films late night back in the day, sometimes starring Peter Cushing or Christopher Lee. And those films were really scary, and they look like very cheaply made as well. And the makeup effects here, that's the only very slight negative for me. It does look like it's a cheaper process. It really does benefit the film looking the way it does. Not only with makeup effects, you've got quite simple looking animatronics where you can tell people are shaking beds, or there's a gimbal being spun around, whatever it takes to make the effect work on camera. And I heard in doing so there's been a few accidents on this film. Didn't Linda Blair end up suffering a fracture? And I heard one of the stuntmen did as well, rolling down the stairs. And maybe even some psychotherapy ongoing for an actor or two. It's an almost infamous film, doesn't it? You've got another story following the film. And all those stories as well where you've got people screaming in theatres and fainting. It's really quite funny when you think about that actually happening. I don't think this is the scariest film ever made. I'm speaking for myself, of course. My scariest film is possibly somewhere around The Omen or The Omen 2 for me. When you're talking about real scary visuals and, you know, things that you take with you to bed at night, that's for rests with those films for me. I know there's been lots of horror films, and you know, the more recent ones don't really do it for me, but those are probably a bit more scary for me than The Exorcist is. But really, this is one creepy film. You know you're watching a horror film, definitely, when you're watching this. So let's give this a score. It's got to be 5 stars, just for the statement that it is. It's a fantastic film. It looks homemade, and that's why it's scary for me. And the legend that comes with it, I love it. And I'm going to probably look at the sequels. Isn't it the third film which is supposed to be the good one? So maybe at a later time I'll look at them and come back here with a review. Thanks for joining me again. Join me again soon for another film chat. You can do that by liking and subscribing and all that. Speak to you again soon. All the best and take care.